Have you ever wondered what someone would discover if they quietly searched for the truth about you? Not the version people see on social media. Not the version shaped by rumors or assumptions. But the real story, the silent battles, the hidden strength, the kindness no one applauded, and the dreams you refused to abandon. Today's story begins with a decision no one expected. Your soulmate had reached a crossroads. Their heart kept pulling them toward you, yet their mind was filled with unanswered questions. Friends offered opinions. Family shared doubts. Strangers spoke with confidence about someone they had never truly known. Finally, they whispered to themselves, "I need the truth." Not gossip. Not speculation. The truth. So they hired an investigator. Someone trained to uncover facts. Someone who believed every mystery eventually had an explanation. The assignment sounded simple. Find out everything about this person. The investigator accepted the case with complete confidence. They had solved complicated situations before. Hidden financial histories. False identities. Broken promises. Secret lives. This would be another ordinary investigation. Or so they thought. The first day was surprisingly quiet. The investigator expected contradictions. Instead, they found consistency. People who knew you from different seasons of life described someone remarkably similar. Not perfect. Not flawless. But genuine. That alone was unusual. The investigator became more curious. Real people usually have complicated stories. So they kept digging. Old classmates. Former co-workers. Neighbors. Teachers. Business contacts. Every conversation revealed another unexpected piece of the puzzle. One person remembered your generosity during a difficult season. Another remembered how you encouraged someone who had nearly given up. Someone else described how you quietly helped without expecting recognition. The investigator wrote page after page. Yet something didn't make sense. Why had nobody ever talked about these things before? Why did your greatest qualities seem almost invisible? Because the loudest people often receive the most attention. But the strongest character is usually discovered in silence. Meanwhile, your soulmate grew increasingly anxious. Every passing day felt longer. What if the investigator finds something that changes everything? Little did they know. Everything was about to change. But not in the way they expected. The investigator continued searching. Financial records. Professional history. Public information. Everything appeared ordinary. No hidden scandals. No shocking crimes. No double life. Instead, they noticed something much more surprising. Whenever life placed extraordinary pressure on you, you became stronger. Whenever circumstances became unfair, you chose integrity. Whenever disappointment arrived, you still found reasons to move forward. The investigator paused. This pattern is unusual. Most people break under repeated pressure. This person keeps rebuilding. Again. And again. And again. Days later, the investigator interviewed someone who had known you during one of the hardest periods of your life. What happened back then, they asked. The answer was simple. They lost more than anyone realized. The investigator waited. But they never became bitter. Another pause. They became kinder. The investigator stopped writing. For several moments, silence filled the room. Because they realized something impossible to measure. Character. The one thing no document can fully explain. The one treasure impossible to fake for long. Back at home, your soulmate kept checking their phone. Waiting. Wondering. Preparing themselves for whatever truth was coming. What they didn't realize. The investigator was no longer looking for your secrets. They were trying to understand your heart. And that was proving far more difficult than expected. Because every answer created 3 new questions. How does someone continue believing after disappointment? How does someone remain compassionate after betrayal? How does someone keep hoping after repeated setbacks? The investigator couldn't explain it. So they searched deeper. Weeks passed. Every lead revealed another hidden act of kindness. Someone remembered a conversation that changed their life. Another remembered your encouragement during failure. Someone admitted they almost gave up on their dreams until hearing your words. None of these moments had been shared publicly. You never asked anyone to announce them. You simply lived them. The investigator sat alone one evening, reviewing every page collected so far. Hundreds of notes. Dozens of interviews. Countless observations. Yet one sentence kept repeating throughout the report. This person leaves people stronger than they found them. The investigator leaned back. I've never written that before. They had investigated influential people. Successful entrepreneurs. Well-known professionals. Public figures. But rarely had they found someone whose greatest achievements were invisible. Achievements measured in healed hearts rather than headlines. And suddenly, everything began making sense. The mystery wasn't hidden wealth. It wasn't secret fame. It wasn't an undiscovered fortune. The real secret was influence. The quiet kind. The lasting kind. The kind that changes lives one conversation at a time without demanding applause. Little by little, the investigator understood why your soulmate had felt drawn toward you from the beginning. Some people carry peace into every room. Others carry pressure. Some carry hope. Others carry fear. Without realizing it, you consistently carried encouragement. That realization shook the investigator more than any shocking discovery ever could. Because they understood something most people never notice. The rarest people aren't those who impress everyone. They're the ones who quietly improve everyone around them. And your soulmate was about to hear those words. Everything they expected was about to be completely turned upside down. The meeting finally arrived. Your soulmate walked into the investigator's office expecting facts, documents, timelines, and perhaps a few uncomfortable surprises. They had prepared themselves for almost anything. A hidden mistake from your past. An old misunderstanding. A chapter of your life that had never been fully explained. Instead, they found something unexpected. The investigator wasn't organizing evidence. They were staring silently at the report as if they had spent hours trying to understand what it actually meant. Your soulmate sat down. So, what did you find? The investigator didn't answer immediately. They slowly closed the folder, looked across the desk, and said something that instantly changed the atmosphere. I've completed hundreds of investigations. I've uncovered lies, exposed secrets, and answered questions people thought would never be solved. But this case became something completely different. Your soulmate frowned. What do you mean? The investigator took a deep breath. I wasn't uncovering hidden darkness. I was uncovering hidden light. Silence filled the room. Your soulmate expected pages filled with dramatic revelations. Instead, the investigator placed a single sentence on top of the report. The greatest secret about this person is that almost nobody knows how much good they have done. Your soulmate blinked. That's the secret? The investigator nodded. And that's exactly why this case affected me. They opened the report. There are people who still remember one conversation with them from years ago. They remember a sentence that gave them hope when they thought everything was over. Another page. There are people who succeeded because this person believed in them before anyone else did. Another page. There are people who never even knew they were being helped. Your soulmate leaned forward. The investigator continued. Everywhere I went, people described different moments. Different places. Different years. But the feeling was always the same. They left the room stronger. Your soulmate remained silent. This wasn't the story they expected. The investigator smiled softly. I started this investigation believing I would discover who they pretend to be. What I discovered is who they remain when nobody is watching. That sentence echoed in the room. Because character has a strange way of revealing itself over time. Reputation can be built with words. Character is built through choices. And according to every person interviewed, your choices told the same story. Again. And again. And again. The investigator turned another page. I also looked into the difficult seasons. Your soulmate immediately became alert. The difficult seasons? Yes. I wanted to know what happened when life wasn't fair. Another long pause. I expected bitterness. I found resilience. I expected revenge. I found forgiveness. I expected pride after success. I found humility. The investigator looked directly at your soulmate. Those patterns cannot be manufactured. Your soulmate slowly asked. So, you're saying everything people assumed was wrong? The investigator answered carefully. I'm saying most people judged from a distance. I investigated from up close. And those are very different perspectives. Then came the moment neither of them would ever forget. The investigator reached the final section of the report. I included one personal observation. Your soulmate looked surprised. You usually don't do that. I know. But this case required it. The investigator read aloud. Some people become successful because they chase recognition. Others become unforgettable because they quietly transform the lives of everyone around them. The room became completely silent. Your soulmate felt their heartbeat quicken. For the first time, they realized they had underestimated you. Not because you were hiding something, but because you never felt the need to advertise who you were. The investigator continued. I finally understood why this assignment became so difficult. There were no sensational secrets. The truth itself was extraordinary. Your soulmate whispered. So, who are they? The investigator closed the folder. They're someone who has survived more than most people realize. They're someone who carries hope without making noise. They're someone whose strength isn't visible until life becomes difficult. And that's incredibly rare. Your soulmate lowered their head. Memories began rushing back. Conversations they once overlooked. Small acts of kindness they had taken for granted. Moments when you encouraged them without asking for anything in return. Suddenly, they saw those memories differently. The investigator noticed the change. You've remembered something. Your soulmate nodded. I thought those were just small moments. The investigator smiled. There are no small moments when someone changes the direction of another person's heart. Then the investigator revealed one final discovery. I interviewed people from completely different parts of this person's life. They didn't know each other. They had no reason to tell the same story. And yet, they all described the same qualities. Consistency, integrity, compassion, courage. The investigator looked at your soulmate with complete certainty. That isn't coincidence. That's identity. Your soulmate slowly asked the question they had been avoiding. So, why did this investigation affect you so much? The investigator looked out the window for a long moment before answering. Because I realized I wasn't investigating an ordinary person. I was investigating someone who reminds people that goodness still exists. And in my line of work, that's the rarest discovery of all. Your soulmate sat there speechless. They had hired someone to uncover your secrets. Instead, the investigation uncovered something about themselves. They realized they had been searching for proof that you could be trusted. But what they actually found was proof that they needed to trust their own heart. Little did they know, however. The investigator had intentionally left one final page until the very end. It contained a realization so unexpected that when your soulmate read it, they would understand why this connection had never felt ordinary from the beginning. Your soulmate reached for the final page with trembling hands. By this point, they believed they had already heard the biggest revelation. They expected a summary, a conclusion, perhaps a recommendation that simply confirmed everything the investigator had already shared. Instead, at the very top of the last page were 7 words that immediately stopped them. This investigation changed the investigator as well. Your soulmate looked up in confusion. You mean, you? The investigator nodded. Yes. I've spent years looking for people's weaknesses. I've built a career assuming that everyone eventually reveals a hidden flaw. They paused before continuing. But this case forced me to ask a different question. What if some people spend their lives hiding their goodness instead of hiding their mistakes? The room fell silent. The investigator slowly continued. When I started following this story, I thought I was searching for secrets. What I actually found was quiet greatness. Your soulmate could hardly believe what they were hearing. The investigator opened a notebook they had carried throughout the investigation. I wrote down every observation that couldn't be measured by documents. They read the first one. People smiled when they spoke about this person. Not because you were famous. Not because you were wealthy. But because your presence had left a lasting impression. The second observation. No one described this person as perfect. Instead, they described someone who admitted mistakes. Someone who apologized sincerely. Someone who learned instead of pretending to know everything. The investigator looked at your soulmate. Perfection never earns lasting trust. Honesty does. Another page. This person consistently chooses peace over proving themselves right. The investigator smiled. I found several situations where arguments could have become much worse. But instead of adding fuel, you chose understanding. That surprised me. Because in a world where everyone wants the final word, you often chose the wiser one. Your soulmate slowly lowered the report. Pieces of the puzzle were finally connecting. They remembered moments they had misunderstood. Times when your silence wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. Moments when your patience wasn't hesitation. It was strength. Moments when your kindness wasn't naivete. It was intentional. The investigator then revealed the discovery that had stayed with them more than anything else. I interviewed someone who barely knew you. Only one brief interaction. Your soulmate listened carefully. I asked them to describe you. They thought for a moment. And then they said something I'll never forget. The investigator looked directly into your soulmate's eyes. They said, "Some people enter a room and everyone notices them. This person leaves the room, and only then do you realize how much peace they brought with them." Silence. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Because some truths don't need explanation. They simply settle into the heart. The investigator continued. That's when I stopped looking for hidden secrets. I already had my answer. Your soulmate quietly asked. So, what exactly am I supposed to take from all this? The investigator smiled gently. You're asking the wrong question. The real question is, can you recognize someone's true value before the rest of the world does? That question lingered in the air. Because it's easy to appreciate someone after everyone else has recognized them. It's much harder to recognize quiet greatness while it's still unnoticed. The investigator stood and walked toward the window. I've solved many mysteries. But this wasn't a mystery. It was a reminder. A reminder that the strongest people often carry themselves with the greatest humility. Then came the final revelation. The investigator handed your soulmate a sealed envelope. I almost didn't include this. Your soulmate carefully opened it. Inside was one handwritten sentence. The greatest secret about this person is not who they have been, but who they are becoming. Your soulmate stared at those words. The investigator explained. Every person I interviewed described growth. They didn't tell me stories about someone who stayed the same. They described someone who kept becoming wiser, more compassionate, more resilient, more intentional. That's incredibly rare. Your soulmate finally understood why this investigation had never produced the dramatic scandal they expected. The biggest revelation wasn't a hidden past. It was a visible future. The investigator spoke one last time. When someone continues growing despite disappointment. When someone refuses to let hardship define them. When someone quietly lifts others while carrying their own burdens. They become the kind of person people spend a lifetime searching for. Your soulmate closed the folder slowly. For a long time, they said nothing. Then, with quiet certainty, they smiled. I thought I hired you to tell me whether I should trust this person. The investigator returned the smile. No. You hired me. To help you see what your heart had already noticed. As your soulmate walked out of the office, they no longer carried questions. They carried clarity. They realized the greatest secret wasn't hidden in files, interviews, or records. It had been present all along. The investigator never uncovered a shocking scandal. They uncovered a life marked by quiet integrity, steady growth, and a character that spoke louder than any rumor ever could. And perhaps that's the rarest revelation of all. Because in a world obsessed with discovering people's darkest secrets, the most unforgettable discovery is finding someone whose greatest secret is simply this. They never stopped choosing kindness, even when life gave them every reason not to. Weeks passed after the investigation ended. But something unusual happened. Your soulmate couldn't stop thinking about the report. Not because it contained dramatic secrets. Not because it exposed hidden scandals. But because every page challenged the way they had been judging people. For the first time, they understood that the most valuable things about a person are often the hardest to see. Patience. Loyalty. Integrity. Quiet courage. None of these qualities make loud headlines. Yet they build the strongest relationships. One evening, your soulmate opened the investigation file one last time. Instead of reading it from beginning to end, they slowly turned to the handwritten notes in the margins. Those notes had never been intended for anyone else. They were simply the investigator's private thoughts during the case. The first note read, "This person has a rare habit of making others feel important." Your soulmate paused. They remembered every conversation you had shared. You listened without rushing. You asked questions because you genuinely cared. You celebrated other people's victories without secretly comparing them to your own. The second note said, "Every difficult season seemed to increase this person's compassion instead of decreasing it." That sentence stayed in your soulmate's mind. Because most people become guarded after disappointment. Many become suspicious after betrayal. Some stop trusting altogether. Yet according to everyone the investigator interviewed, you had somehow become more understanding instead of more bitter. Your soulmate whispered. How did I never notice this before? The answer was simple. Some treasures become invisible because they are consistent. When kindness appears every day, people stop realizing how extraordinary it actually is. Days later, your soulmate unexpectedly met the investigator again. This time it wasn't in an office. It happened by chance. After exchanging greetings, your soulmate smiled. I've read the report at least 10 times. The investigator laughed. I had a feeling you would. There was something I forgot to tell you. Your soulmate became curious. What is it? The investigator looked thoughtful. During the investigation, I spoke with one elderly person who knew them many years ago. They said something I never included in the report. Why not? Because I wasn't sure anyone would believe it. Your soulmate leaned forward. What did they say? The investigator answered quietly. They told me that some people are remembered for what they accomplish. But a very small number are remembered for how they make people feel. I think your person belongs in the second group. Those words settled deeply. Success eventually changes. Titles come and go. Money rises and falls. But the feeling people carry after meeting someone sometimes lasts forever. The investigator continued. Do you know what surprised me most? Your soulmate shook their head. I couldn't find anyone who claimed this person deliberately tried to impress people. They simply chose consistency. They treated strangers with respect. They kept promises whenever possible. They admitted mistakes. They celebrated other people's progress. They remained hopeful during difficult seasons. And without realizing it, they built trust. The investigator smiled. Trust isn't built in one extraordinary moment. It's built through hundreds of ordinary ones. Your soulmate slowly nodded. Everything finally made sense. The attraction they had always felt wasn't based on mystery. It wasn't based on excitement alone. It was based on something much deeper. Safety. Peace. Authenticity. Qualities that cannot be manufactured. Only lived. A few days later, your soulmate closed the investigation file forever. Not because it no longer mattered, but because every answer they needed was already inside their heart. The investigation had started with suspicion. It ended with admiration. It started with questions. It ended with confidence. It started as a search for hidden secrets. It ended with the discovery that your greatest secret was never hidden at all. It was simply overlooked. As they reflected on everything they had learned, one final realization became impossible to ignore. Real love is not built on perfect people. It is built on honest people. People who continue growing. People who choose grace over pride. People who remain kind when no one is watching. People who quietly become the answer to someone else's prayers without ever knowing it. Your soulmate smiled to themselves. I thought I hired an investigator to reveal who this person really was. But all the investigation did was reveal how fortunate I am to have crossed paths with them. And perhaps that's the greatest twist in this entire story. The investigator never discovered a hidden identity. They discovered a hidden legacy. A legacy written in encouragement instead of applause. In faithfulness instead of fame. In quiet acts of goodness instead of loud recognition. Because the rarest people are not those who convince the world they are extraordinary. The rarest people are those who quietly make the world around them a little brighter every single day. If this story reminded you that true character is revealed through consistent actions rather than appearances, carry that thought with you today. You never know who is silently changing lives simply by choosing kindness, integrity, and hope. And sometimes, the greatest secret anyone can discover about another person is not that they are hiding darkness. It's that they have been quietly carrying light all along.